All right, so welcome to this episode of What to Say and How to Say It. We're going to be talking about something that affects everybody, and it's what you don't know about emotions and how it's ruining your relationships. And we're going to start talking about men with Kyle today, Kyle Hargrove. He's a licensed professional counselor, volumes of wisdom in the therapy department and dealing with people and emotions. And towards the end, we're gonna dip into some things about women. We're going to start with men, but we're going to tell you some things about women that you may not know and may not want to hear. So anyway, but I'm a chick and I can go there. And he's the therapist, so he can too. So anyway, let's launch in. Kyle, where do you want to start?
Where do I want to start? That's always the best question. And you always ask me, so I probably should prepare for that better. But it's good to be back with you. And thank you for inviting me again. And I guess the thing about men and emotion that impacts us the most are two. Number one, it's the magic and the myth of that men don't feel emotion like women do, and that obviously we don't handle our emotions in the same way. And the second is that we can't. It's not in our DNA to express ourselves emotionally, to name those feelings and to identify them and then be able to communicate them effectively. And I think that because men do, because of those mythological things and societal patterns that we've picked up on in our culture, I think that don't think this. Don't think that because men often lack the skill to express their feelings that they don't have them. Because boy, we do. I happen to be a man, and I sometimes can't keep up with my feelings. It's not that I'm not willing to name them or to normalize them or to find a constructive and sometimes creative way to deal with them. It is that I have so many of them at times, and I may be a little more emotional than the average man, and I'm okay with that. I think some of my friends have occasionally called me a low functioning woman. And I don't think it's cool, but they think it's really funny. But I have a lot of feelings, and I feel them. I don't always know what they are, and I don't always know what to do with them, probably like most people. Mm-hmm. But I notice through the work that I do with both individual men and men in relationships, as when we do couples therapy, that it does seem to be a bit more work to extract, to pull those feelings out. And I don't think it's that they're unwilling to. I think it's that they don't know how to.
Yeah. Yeah. The culture does a lot in terms of impacting what the perception of manhood, if you will, is, and how men are supposed to behave. And it seems like from a movie director standpoint, you get these tender moments with the mostly protective, whatever, saving the day dude. But what women really want is the both. But having that, our culture doesn't do a great job of helping men become emotionally intelligent, or women, and we'll talk about that later. But what is it you think that's going on from the time that they're little that sets these guys up to not know what to do?
Well, first off, I agree with you. I think culture, more so than ever before, does encourage men to share their feelings, but doesn't do a great deal about teaching them how. They really kind of fail when it comes to that. So I think in large part, unless men have had a role model or two in their lives that have been very important, who are not afraid to be emotional and to recognize that we are created as emotional beings, even the men. I think they're going to struggle with that. And, I guess that's why therapy is so important at times. And probably therapy is misunderstood a lot of times, that, people think that if they go to therapy, that a lot of stuff has to be wrong, and that they things they don't want people to know about, and so on and so forth. But cognitive behavioral therapy, especially, it's about being educated or re-educated. It's about identifying faulty thinking. And the faulty thinking here is that we don't feel like women do. No, we don't
Right.
have those feelings like they do. And we're certainly not free to express them, especially even more so than that with other men.
Yeah. What's that about? Because that's
Boy,
the thing.
that is a thing. That is a thing. And I can't tell you how grateful I am for the community of men that I have around me. And that's what and we make it very plain from the get-go. This is about you and your life. This is about me and my life. And we're going to be in it. You're going to be in mine and I'm going to be in yours. And we're going to talk about what we feel and what we're thinking. And we're going to help each other in terms of being accountable to move in certain directions instead of the directions that we might instead. But it's just been taught that way. It's just been taught that way as culturally, that, big boys don't cry, and never let them see you sweat, and, maintain control no matter what, because control, of course, is something we have to have. And if we don't have it, we can't live. But losing control, I think, is something that we're so fearful of, whether it be the situation going on or with our emotions. So if I can't express my emotions and stay flat, then I just can't do it.
So I have a couple questions around this. So I'm in I don't remember, coffee shop a couple of years back. I'm having a meeting, and this gal, she's probably 25. She's got two kids with her. One's about 4, one's about 3, little boy, little girl. And they're sitting at a table, and there's a chair that's kind of rocking, right? And it's rocking because they're putting the feet up on it, and it's a little unstable to begin with. So they put the feet up on the table and they're pushing back. And the little girl tips the thing over.
Uh-oh.
And she's on the floor. She's crying. Mom goes over. Oh, it's okay. Come here now. Da, 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 no, come on. It's all right. And she's hugging her. That was really scary, wasn't it? She validates the little girl's experience. She sits with her and holds her. She cries for a few minutes, or, whatever. The whole thing takes like 2 or 3 minutes. And then they move on, right? Meeting goes on for a little longer. And I look over there, and the little boy's in the chair, and he's doing the same thing. He flips over, and he's, doing the same thing the little girl was doing. This time, Mom, and she's not in a hurry to go anywhere. She looked perfectly fine. Like I'm looking at her. She doesn't see him rocking. She's just looking at her phone. She looks up, sees him start to go over, and she doesn't look physically annoyed or, emotionally disturbed or anything. But she goes over to him and she goes, "You're fine. Come on, get up, get back in your chair." There's no comforting happening at all. This little boy is crying. And there's no nurturing going on whatsoever. She's like, "You're fine, shake it off." And I'm like, no, I've raised 2 boys, and I don't think they're any different. I mean, they get hurt, they have emotions, and then I finally had a daughter, and it was, just a whole different deal, but they still had emotions, right? Everybody had emotions. I don't think our culture, I think we're wired to tell boys to stuff it, get over yourself.
Rub some dirt on it. If you're even allowed to rub it. I mean, that's the thing. But let's look at that for a second, though. You mentioned something right there that kind of rang a bell in my head about, as little boys, the way we show emotion usually is when we get hurt. Okay. We cry. We're afraid. Half the time, the tears are just about fear, or I saw blood. It's not about intense pain or something that, like that. But I think as we grow older, we associate emotions of being hurt with emotion.
Oh.
Period. And if it's not okay to show that you're hurt when you're a child, well, it's certainly not okay to show you're hurt or emotional in any way as a fully grown man.
Wow.
Or as an adult. I think that perception says if you show emotion, automatically, no matter what emotion it is, no matter what feeling it is, you are entering to an area of vulnerability that is going to make you look weak.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. Some of my friends thought I was crazy with how I raised my boys, because I would validate to extremes sometimes, just to bring them back into, because the more you validate somebody, the faster they come into being able to have a rational brain again, right?
Yeah.
And I was with some friends one time, and I think he was about 5 or 6 years old, and he was just furious with his little brother, and he's mad. And I said, "I bet you just hate him right now." And he's like, "No, but I'm really mad." And I said, "I bet you want to punch him in the face." He goes, "No, but I'm really mad." I said, "You are really mad about this?" And he goes, "Well, yeah." And I said, "Okay, So what are you really mad about? Like and then we had this discussion about what he was really mad about, but I just, boom, got rid of the, everything that he was, because I was right there with him in that, and I wasn't mocking him. Right. My friend that's watching this is like, how could you just put that out there that it's okay for him to hate and punch his brother in the face? I'm like, I'm not doing that. Inside of him, probably somewhere, is something that wants to hit something.
Oh, yeah.
And if I pretend that's not there, that's saying that that's not in you, and I'm going to reject that piece of you. And I love my kid even when he's ugly. I know what's really on the inside of me, and there's a piece of me that's ugly, right? Thank you, Jesus, for loving me anyway. And no human on the planet probably knows that about me. But the whole point is that you gotta meet kids where they're at, no matter how ugly it is, and it doesn't matter what gender they are.
I don't think it's any different for adults than it is for kids. The problem is, for men especially, it becomes a guessing game as to where we're at. Someone wants to meet us where we're at, but then we don't express that. We don't show that. And I think one of the things, and I talk with clients about this all the time, you're going to deal with your feelings and emotions. You are. Or your feelings and emotions are going to deal with you.
Yeah.
When they deal with you, you lose every element of control that you can think of. You don't decide when, you don't decide where, you don't decide how, and probably most importantly, you don't decide on whom those feelings and emotions come out. If you don't recognize them, handle them, work them through. I like to, knead them like dough until you find out what all is in there and smooth it out.
Yeah, that is a real thing. They're in there. Yeah. And if they're not dealt with, they come out, and you don't know how. I'm thinking of some of the families, the couples that I work with, and you've probably got these people too, where the wife will say something, or one of the kids, teenagers especially, are great for rubbing edges and grown-ups, right? And one of the parents, or the husband, since we're talking about men, will think it means something that it doesn't. And so, like, even if it's something at dinner and it's just a comment, it kaboom, right? And then nobody knows what to do with that. And I think the problem is dad didn't know what to do with that, didn't know that was in there, and then nobody knows what to do.
Yeah.
So speak to that for a minute.
Literally every time we talk, every conversation we have goes back to intentionality and practicing things, learning about ourselves, and learning what we do, what we don't do, what we know, what we don't know, what we're comfortable with, and what we're uncomfortable with. And learning how to handle those things, because they exist. We can pretend they don't all we want. And in that pretension comes misunderstanding, comes different assumptions about things, different ideas about things. People who do this well, couples who do this well, who are on the same wavelength, who seem to be laser focused with each other all the time, that doesn't happen by accident.
Right.
And it rarely, if ever, happens naturally. It's because people say, okay, conflict it's going to happen. It's going to exist, even in the best of relationships. We're going to learn how to navigate that. We're going to entertain not only the possibility, but the reality that there are going to be times when we don't agree and it doesn't feel good. And it feels like you'd like to walk. We're going to work it through.
Jesus was an emotional dude.
Oh, yes.
God's an emotional God. And so where do you think the church is getting messed up with this? I mean, we're all very good about talking about self-control, and I'm not saying you shouldn't be self-controlled and self-disciplined, sound-minded, but we've almost had a shutting down of emotions. I mean, it's had the opposite effect. So all these things that you're talking about are spot on, but it's like, where's the disconnect happening? That if we know this about Jesus and the Lord, why are we doing it this way? Not getting where we should be going.
We've been told that these things are sin.
Say more about that.
We've been told that some of the really ugly emotions that everybody feels and everybody experiences are sin. It is sin to be angry. No, it's not. It's normal to be angry. The sin comes in how we handle the anger.
Because it says
to do
in your anger, do not sin, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Jealousy, even hate. These are things we feel. These are things we experience. It is normal to experience them, not sinful. Again, the sin comes in how do we love our fellow human being, even with this feeling, and we refuse to go there. Instead, hurt people. Step on the little dog that depends on you for everything. It's still going to turn around and bite you.
Yeah.
Because that hurt. And the feelings that we have are painful, and they usually involve other people. So then we take action. We arm up, we gear up, and we go into battle instead of trying to figure out, what do I do with this? What do I do? And that's why men, I think, when they don't express their feelings and don't communicate their feelings, they get shoved down deeper. They get shoved down further. So when they come out, they have more momentum. And the more momentum those feelings have, the uglier they're going to be. Again, when you didn't deal with it, it deals with you. And that momentum coming out, man, there's a lot of time and pressure built up behind it. And when it comes out, it's not fun to see.
Well, women are afraid of that.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, we're smaller. We're physically weaker. Not less than. Nobody get their knickers in a knot. Sorry, ladies. Come on. I just hate all of that. I mean, let's just do basic biology for a second. Men have 8 to 10 times more testosterone than women do. That's just a thing. It's biology. And so that means you're going to be more muscular. You could snap me in half. Okay, great. From a primitive state of mind, I'm going to be a little more self-protective, which means that I'm going to shy away from that naturally. One of the things we teach women to do is step into it, and they don't want to do it because they're scared, and understandably so. But I think as a culture, we're all afraid of emotions.
Oh, yes.
The big ones, right? And culturally, we're afraid of other people's emotions, and then we don't even know that we're responding with the same thing. And it's this stupid cycle that gets going.
Well, it's because it doesn't always look the same.
What do you mean?
The same thing, but the way that it's being behaved looks completely different. The way you are you hangry right now? The way that you handle intense anger and the way that I do may be completely different. Or maybe it's the same, but you get there at a stage when I'm still deeply buried and I'm hiding as I try to filter these things out and sort them out. When we don't do that, men, I think, as a rule, have the tendency to convert and compensate or convert their feelings. It's not okay, for instance, or it's okay for a man to show anger and pride. I mean, this is what we do. It's not okay for a man to show sadness or vulnerability.
Well, and that's if you're men, right? Because women love men that can be sad and vulnerable, as long as they're also confident and protective. And, because there's super needy men that women don't want any part of.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's not attractive.
No.
And it pushes anybody, any gender. I mean, that's not just men. If you're super needy, that pushes people away from you. But women want to connect emotionally with the man that they married.
It's terrifying.
What is that? Like,
terrifying.
What is
that? We just don't know how. We just don't know how. And I don't think we can even identify it half the time. We got that conversion table that goes on the inside of us that, every emotion that we have that we can't deal with or can't put our finger on comes out as anger. Or it comes out as, a prideful defense of everything that is. And so, when it's like when you're a tiny little child and your mom, you meet everything was chicken. Didn't matter what it was. Give little kids steak. You want some? I want chicken. I want chicken. Okay, here you. Okay, thank you for the chicken. Doesn't matter what color it was or what it was. They knew. Well, for men, anger and pride is their chicken. Everything seems to come out that way. And so the tender feelings, the ability to be vulnerable to the point of saying, I'm in pain, I hurt, I'm sad, my feelings are hurt. What somebody did or said or a situation that occurred hurt my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
That's a level of vulnerability that a lot of men are unable or unwilling to go to.
Well, and do you find that a lot of women don't handle men's emotions well? I know I've struggled with this a lot too. It's like, what do you
How
do?
interesting that is. Okay, and here I brought my graphic of the day here because men find themselves sometimes, women too. I'm just being funny. Okay, the old rock in the hard place, and you are here because, like I said earlier, society encourages men more and more in this time that we're supposed to share our emotions, and it's okay to share our emotions. But I think the two things that men will say, and I'm not being mean either, okay, but I'm just saying these are two things men will say because of experience is, number one, sometimes women only want men to share emotions in certain ways. And they only want men to share emotions in doses that they can handle. And so if it comes out in a way that makes some people uncomfortable or, isn't just like they expect it to be, or if you do it the way that you do it is not the way that I do it, then it's not okay. And I think that is a man-woman thing sometimes. Also, men who are expressive of feelings are often considered, especially when it's fear, okay, they're often considered poorly adjusted.
Talk more about that for a minute.
Yeah. Well, let's just call it what it is. Men who express fear are, I think, culturally considered weak. Okay. And if there's one thing a man doesn't want to be perceived as, it's weak.
And, I find that so interesting. And I think that comes so heavily into both genders' perception of men, right? And women, we're kind of, hypocrites because we say we want to know what you're feeling. But when you share that with us, we don't like it a good chunk of the time. And then we don't respond, we react to it. And usually when we react negatively, it's either some angry outburst of our own based in criticism or blame.
Yeah.
Which then just reinforces to the guy, you know what? I was right. I can't talk to you about this. Yeah, I should have gone with plan A, which was to go to the cave.
Yeah. Well, I have a question for you.
Uh-huh.
Although women in general may be more aware of their emotions and more, it is more acceptable for them to express their emotions, are they really better? I think that the consensus or the assumption is that they are. Are they really better at constructively expressing them?
So I'm going to use data here because nobody's going to like this answer that's female. And I also want to say, okay, dudes, y'all ain't any better either. Hang on, it's your horse. But if you look at the Big Five Personality Index, it's a personality profile. It's been around for 15, 20 years. It's the most valid, reliable thing cross-culturally that we have to look at personality. And so cross-culturally, you can make some assumptions about people, genders, and these are generalities of social science, but there are some significant differences. Overall, men and women are very similar emotionally, very similar personality-wise, but there are some very specific differences. One of them is, we'll talk about two of them. First of them is agreeableness. Women are generally a little bit more agreeable than men are. And what that means is that we're wired to protect children. Women inherently know how bad conflict is for children. So we're going to diffuse that a little bit more naturally, right? We're going to do things in a more agreeable way so that, And men need to have, they're a little bit higher on the aggression scale, and they need that because the aggression isn't, I'm going to punch you in the face. Aggression is, I'm going to go start something. I'm going to go take action. I'm going to do, it's initiative, basically. A little bit different, but women don't have the assertiveness skills. Not all women, like 40% of women are fine in the assertiveness department, maybe a little bit too much so. Okay. But the agreeableness kind of wins out in femaleness. There's more agreeable women than there are agreeable men. You can see this in prisons.
Yeah.
Most prison inmates are men. So think about that. Those are people committing crimes. Most in the armed forces. Let's go have conflict for a job. Those are mostly men. 0.02% of the armed forces, police department, fire department, all of those dangerous types of jobs requiring some aggression. Those are men. Yes. So all that is great, necessary, wonderful. Thank God for men, like for real. And there's this whole feelings thing that you were talking about that's challenging for them. And, and I'm not beating up on women. I'm a woman. I gave birth to one. My best friends are women. Okay. I love women, love men too. But the point is that both genders have some things to work on, right? Yeah. Women in the big five, there's this neuroticism scale. So we talk about agreeables, we talk about neuroticism. That's how much do you deal with negative emotion? And so that's stress, worry, anxiety, fear of threat, that kind of stuff, which makes sense that women would be a little bit more, and they are more neurotic. No offense, ladies, but this is true, than men are. And here's the thing that this is why I think God tells women to respect their husbands. Because if you look at how men treat each other, the language of respect is about emotional control. They don't interrupt each other. If they interrupt each other, it's to take control. I mean, so they generally don't interrupt each other, and they view that really negatively. And so women that interrupt, they have problems relationally. So stop that, girls. But then on top of that, they're also very patient. They validate, they ask questions, men do, more so than women do. This is a thing where we need to really work because it doesn't come naturally to us. And unfortunately, our culture has given us permission. And this makes me crazy. I have corporate clients managers that deal with women who are out of control emotionally. And they just men I work with don't want to deal with them, these women. And so the women escalate and they're emotional about all these things. And, the encouragement, the coaching I've given them is to say, it seems like there's some emotional something here that maybe we should table this until we can talk about it more rationally. I encourage the men to don't ignore it, because if you ignore it, you're condoning it, but you don't want to criticize it. And if you do, you're just going to get worse. She'll start crying in a meeting or behave really unprofessionally. But we've got to stop tolerating that kind of business or behavior in business and in relationships, because I don't think women intend to, but their emotions can manipulate just like men's emotions. Anger causes people to be afraid. So, we got to understand that our emotions impact each other. Yeah. And so we need to do something about that. Women's brains are different. I mean, the right and left thing. You want to talk about that? Some interactions, brain-wise.
You know more about that than you know more about the brain research than I do.
Well, our brains are different, men and women. Yeah, so you guys are awesome at focusing on stuff. And women see all these connections, which upsets us half the time. Because you forgot the milk. Well, that means soccer practice is going to be a mess tomorrow. That makes no sense to you.
Right.
But I think that's part of our neuroticism temptations, right? Because we got all these connections.
In a relationship, if it was based on something that I forgot, we would be in conflict all the I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think it's also a maturity thing, though. I'll tell on myself as a very, very young married person at about the age of 20, we're sound asleep one night and we heard somebody messing with the lock on our back door. And I did have a gun, a rifle in the corner, but I'm 20. It's 19. Well, I was 20. And so she says to me, "I'm afraid." And I said, that's okay. Don't worry about it. She goes, are you afraid? And apparently the wrong answer was, yes, I'm afraid too. Because then she unleashed on me about how I wasn't supposed to be afraid. I was not able to be afraid, because if I was, then she couldn't be. She shouted so loud it scared the burglars away. So that's a very immature response or reaction to someone being honest about, yeah, I'm kind of afraid right now.
Yeah.
I don't know who's on the other side of that door. If they have a weapon, I'm afraid. But I think sometimes we don't grow that way. And then when we're in our 40s and 50s, we're still responding or reacting to someone sharing their emotions with us. Like, well, if you're afraid, then when do I get to be afraid? And if you are afraid, that means maybe you're not going to be there or be available So I think as we grow older in our relationships, that we need to be doing the work to become more mature in how we look at things.
Yeah.
And how, in my 50s, I think my wife would expect me to say, yeah, I'm a little concerned right now that there's somebody outside our door trying to get in when they know we don't want them here.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Not okay when you're 20 and a newlywed.
Right. Yeah.
At this point.
But you're the dude with the gun, though. Yeah. I mean, in that situation, you grab the gun.
I don't think at that point I had ever fired a gun.
Yeah, but you see what I'm saying here? I mean, it's in your wiring to grab the gun and
I didn't want to pick it up and go over there and get on the other side of the door.
Of course not. Of course not. But you had it, right? And that initiative showed up with you first. When my husband used to travel, well, when he wasn't traveling, when he was at home, he was the investigator of all things dark and creepy, bumping in the night, and the killer of spiders, right?
Oh, of course.
So when he traveled and I got kids in the house, I'm stuck with that job and I didn't want it, but I had to level up to that. Right. And I imagine it's the same kind of fear thing, and you're like, I'm going to do this scared. And with little kids, you got to portray confidence because they're just going to melt down, and then you can't deal with that. Right. The only way I found of handling that was, Mommy, are you scared? Jesus is with us. I just didn't answer the question.
Yeah. For us, it was, you know what? If mom and dad are not afraid, there's no reason for you to be afraid. Mm-hmm. And then turn around and go, well, I'm afraid. Yeah. What are we gonna do? But to never let them see you do that. But
yeah.
I think, that the fear and those emotions, they're a part of who we all are. I think there's a lot of misconception about who can and who should when it comes to emoting. Mm-hmm. I think there's a lot of misconception about men's capability of doing it. We're very capable of communicating well, but I would say more men than not have not either been taught or taken the time to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and women don't understand how they lose credibility and influence when they don't mature in emotional intelligence and control. Just because you have emotions doesn't mean that you should not have control of them. That's the maturity space for us. And we have more influence when we can be calm, when we have conquered fear. And that's both genders, honestly.
Yes, no doubt about it. And that, like my story of, the way I chose to admit that I was afraid is not the way I would do it now.
Yeah.
Maturity, emotional maturity comes through experience and not ignoring that there are feelings and emotions in those experiences in life that stink, mm-hmm. that hurt, and some we don't want to talk about because sometimes it causes us to have to be culpable. Mm-hmm. Most people I know, the older they get, the more humility they gain.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing.
And that comes through, recognizing and realizing nobody thinks you're perfect. Everybody else knows you made the mistake. You may as well admit that you made it.
Yeah. Yeah. Nobody thinks you're perfect. No, everyone knows you're not. Yeah. Right. Everyone knows I'm not. One of my favorite things, if I can talk about this for a second, I have a list of, I get this off of Brené Brown website, brenebrown.com. It's a list of core emotions. The thing I hate about this so much is there's 30 of these. And these are the ones that her research shows that if you're going to be a healthy adult, you need to be able to identify and interact with. 30 emotions. That's a stupid big number. Most people are like, how do you feel? Good. How do you feel? Bad. You know, no, is more angry,
Yes.
not good, okay. No, those aren't, I mean, angry is emotion, but it's a secondary emotion.
Yep.
Our culture's so bad at this. And if I could say something to the moms and the dads out there, is to stop being scared of your kids' emotions. We got to stop raising people that don't know what to do. Women get so frustrated they can't connect with their husbands, and we're creating this in the next generation. So let's knock it off.
Yeah, I mean, how more well-adjusted would a young person be, a young adult be, if when they were 4 or 6 and they had been, everybody else that was playing in the yard ran off playing somebody's yard and told them they couldn't come.
Mm-hmm.
If their parents were to sit down with them while they're crying and say, you feel left out, don't you?
Yeah.
You feel abandoned by your friends, don't you? If a child can learn to connect with those emotions at that age, just think how much further ahead in the game they're going to be when they become adults.
Mm-hmm.
So it's critical what you're talking about. I really like that.
Yeah, and the stuff that you're talking about with men and the way that they're brought up and engaging in this, my heart just aches for men. They get such a bad rap in our culture, in the inability to tap into that, and women long for that connection. So what advice would you give to a wife or a daughter, anybody who's trying to interact with her siblings or her father or husband, that wants to connect and he doesn't know how to do that? What do you do if you're a chick and trying to do that?
Well, I think those questions are really important. I think the willingness to sit down, and of course it would take the willingness of the male individual as well, but just to identify, I know you must be, this must feel like, you're not saying much, but it seems to me like, just probably got a bucket load of sentence starters, just for scenarios like that. You pick the one that best fits the scenario and you plug the word in that you're seeing. But the judgment, because you're not handling your feelings the way I think you should, or this doesn't feel good to me, therefore you shouldn't be doing it, or I can't, or not doing it, whatever the case might be. Those are the things that are going to prohibit men from becoming willing to and more comfortable with being in touch with. I hate that because it's construed so many, and get in touch with your feelings. But to be able to identify, name it, normalize it, say, I'm not unusual for feeling this. It's okay. But then understanding that we were not created and our societies are not designed for us to handle conflict and difficulty internally or otherwise alone.
Yeah.
And that we've got to verbalize that with somebody.
Well, and the thing that bothers me so much about the church, and I love the church, but this bothers me about the church. And I've done exactly what you said that was the wrong thing, because I was taught that was sin. Right. I grew up as an atheist. I didn't know what I was doing. You do the best that you can. I learned it, I think, too late, but that's my judgment. Like, God's like, you'll learn it when I tell you, go and learn it, sis, But the whole thing of, judging somebody else's emotions is wrong, not useful to anybody. Right.
Nobody.
And so what do you do as a man if you've got a history of these kind of interactions with the women in your life and the men in your life? Like, how do you create a different culture for that?
For me, I can I can tell you my own experience. It happened when I was willing. I was tired enough of myself. I was tired enough of fighting with my feelings that I became willing to share my feelings with other men. That's where it started.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Once I became comfortable doing that, I became way more comfortable in dealing with my feelings with my spouse and with my children and with other people that were close to me in my life. Because, and I had to be very careful and selective about the men that I shared with, because we had the no stones. You see no stones in my hand.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm not throwing anything at you because I don't have the right to. No judgment here. say what you need to say. And learning to do that was so freeing. I presumed, and presumed correctly, that if I could learn to do it with them, and it felt so good and so freeing to have people listen and identify, sympathize and empathize, that it would probably work the same way at home. And it did.
So I have a couple of men that I've worked with that say, those cultures don't exist, or that they've tried to share their feelings and that the men around them treat them as they're weak and they don't want to hear it. So what do you tell them about how to find these groups, how to create that? Where do they start?
I think all of us have somebody we respect, somebody that we look up to because we see that, they interact well with other people. They have a good rapport. They seem to be emotionally mature and, to be able to be consistent with their emotions. And I'm going to tell you, doing this to begin with, it either takes somebody else making the suggestion and us saying, yeah, me too. Or it takes courage. It takes real courage, because it's a fearful thing to go to another man and say, can we have coffee? I like to run a couple of things by you. Would you mind having coffee with me one day this week or whatever? And just saying, I admire you. I respect you. You seem to handle things well. I'm struggling with some things. May I share them with you? That takes a lot of courage.
Yeah.
I would say, generally speaking, either churches or men's groups or men's ministries are probably the best places to identify individuals or small groups of individuals that would be willing to meet together and share in the burdens of one another, and to become intimately involved in one another's lives and as a system of support and accountability. I don't think we should live without that.
Yeah, I agree.
If I don't have accountability, there is no end to the things I might do.
Yeah, I get that. And I think women come by that so much more naturally, just because of the circumstances we find ourselves in and the play dates and the, service projects and blah, 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 at least up until we get to retirement age. And then, men have more time on their hands, it seems. But so it really is intentional for men, and women kind of fall into it a little bit more naturally, but it's worth doing. I mean, God created himself in community, so we should emulate that for sure.
We don't live in an aristocratic society where everybody has roles and expectations and you're not allowed to step outside of them. We don't live that way.
Right.
We live where we're all human beings. We all have the basic functioning bodies and minds and hearts of human beings, and we're all capable of feeling the same things.
Yeah.
So if not, why can't we all share it and deal with it and have somebody to support us with it?
Well, and I think that's the big takeaway from today is that, there's some differences between men and women, but honestly, at the core, we all feel the same things. We all get hurt, and recognizing that can really change your relationships. So I appreciate you tackling this topic. And I know we put men and women in the hot seat today.
All right.
just a little bit. But if you want to, whether you're male or female, you can stop by greaterimpact.org and pick up our free ebook called Stop Walking on Eggshells, because that is something that both men and women deal with. So thank you so much, and we'll see you online.